The coastal wind carried salt and the distant sound of waves, but inside the base gates it was all boots, orders, and noise. Trucks rolled in one after another, dropping off clusters of recruits who looked equal parts nervous and eager. It was Joint Forces Evaluation Week, the program designed to break down every illusion of toughness. The yard was a mess of shouted names, duffels thudding on concrete, and the sharp scent of oil and sweat. In the middle of it all, one figure stood out for all the wrong reasons. Elara Quinn stepped down from the last transport truck like she'd wandered in from another world. Her fatigues were faded, sleeves rolled twice at the cuffs, and her boots looked like they'd seen too many miles. She carried a single worn canvas bag slung over one shoulder, the kind you didn't find in regulation supply. Her posture was straight but unhurried, her face unreadable beneath the shadow of her cap. "Logistics transfer," she said quietly when the intake officer asked her name. The officer frowned, checked the clipboard twice, then again. Her name wasn't there. "Not my problem," she murmured, and he waved her through anyway. By lunch, the whispers had already started. Someone said she'd shown up without orders. Someone else said she was a civilian trying to get a free ride. The recruits laughed about it, the kind of laughter that comes easy when you think you've already found the camp's weak link. Sergeant Coleman made sure it stayed that way. Coleman was the kind of man who could turn a drill field into a stage. Loud, smug, and built like the wall of a bar fight, he thrived on humiliation disguised as discipline. When he noticed the quiet woman with the unmarked bag, his eyes lit up. "Hey, transfer," he barked, pointing a finger like a weapon. "You carrying your lunch in there or classified laundry?" The yard chuckled. Elara stopped mid-step, turned toward him, and said nothing. Coleman grinned. "What's the matter? Cat got your tongue? Let's see what you're hiding." Inspection time. The recruits formed a loose half-circle around her, sensing blood. Elara didn't move as Coleman grabbed the bag from her shoulder and dropped it onto the ground. Dust puffed up around his boots as he unzipped it with exaggerated flair. Inside were a few plain items: a rolled T-shirt, a small field manual, a canteen, a neatly folded piece of cloth. Coleman snorted. "Disappointing," he said, then froze as his hand brushed something at the bottom, a small black case with a magnetic clasp and a red seal embossed on the lid. The emblem caught the light, sharp and unmistakable. The laughter stopped. Coleman flipped it open. Inside, resting on dark foam, was an identification card, matte black, gold-edged, stamped with Naval Command, Red Seal clearance. The kind of tag you didn't just find. The kind of tag that opened doors most people never even knew existed. "What kind of joke is this?" Coleman demanded, his tone faltering. "You printing your own badges now?" Elara's voice was calm, almost gentle. "You shouldn't touch what isn't cleared for you." For a moment, no one breathed. The sound of the sea returned, distant, hollow, carried on the wind. The officers standing by the platform exchanged quick glances. One of them muttered something about verifying her record. The recruits just stared. Coleman's bravado returned in a flash of red-faced anger. "Fake," he said loudly, tossing the card back into the bag. "Next time you try to bluff, at least spell naval right." The crowd laughed again, uneasy this time, the sound thinner than before. Elara picked up the bag, dusted off the corner, and slung it back over her shoulder. Her expression didn't change. She simply met Coleman's eyes for half a heartbeat, not defiant, not afraid, just still. Then she turned and walked toward the far end of the yard, where the shadows of the hangars stretched long and quiet. The recruits murmured among themselves. "She's finished," someone whispered. "Coleman's gonna bury her." But one of the officers didn't join in the laughter. He leaned toward another and said under his breath, "You ever seen a Red Seal ID in person?" The other shook his head. Behind them, Coleman was still trying to make a joke out of it, waving the confiscated tag for the others to see. But as he held it up, the base intercom crackled to life for a brief, sharp second, a low tone, followed by a digital voice. "Clearance code registered. Authorization. Red Seal. Commander access confirmed, asterisk asterisk." The words hung in the air like a gunshot. Every head turned. Coleman's grin faltered. Alara didn't stop walking. She adjusted the strap on her shoulder and disappeared into the line of barracks, leaving silence and confusion in her wake. That was the first day anyone learned her name. The day they searched her bag to expose her and instead uncovered something they weren't ready to understand. The second day began before dawn. The air was thick with salt and dust, the kind that stuck to your skin and made every breath feel heavier. Reveille blared through the barracks, and the recruits scrambled out of their bunks, half-dressed, half-awake. Alara was already up, boots laced, hair tied back, sitting quietly on the edge of her bunk. She didn't rush, didn't bark orders, didn't join the chaos. She just waited until the shouting died down, then stood and walked out. By mid-morning, Sergeant Coleman had found his next opportunity. The roster updates had come in overnight, and he made a show of reading them out loud during formation. New assignments, ladies and gentlemen. Top performers to Alpha. The rest of you, well, you'll find out where you belong. His eyes landed on Alara. He smirked. Quinn, you're reassigned to Delta, the recycling bin of this camp. Congratulations. Delta Unit was a patchwork of mistakes, a place for recruits who were too reckless, too lazy, or too broken to fit anywhere else. They stood at the far end of the yard, half in shadow, half forgotten. When Alara joined them, a few snickers rippled through the line. Someone muttered, "Guess the ghost got ghosted." Coleman made sure the humiliation stuck. During drills, he called her Miss Clearance, made her carry extra weight, and left her behind on every equipment rotation. Her bag, the same canvas one that had caused the commotion, became his favorite target. "Gotta keep the classified junk under control," he'd say, locking it in the supply cage. Wouldn't want her to hack the Pentagon. The others followed his lead. In the mess hall, conversations stopped when she entered. No one sat near her. At night, when the others laughed and swapped stories, she cleaned her boots and said nothing. The silence made them nervous. They mistook it for weakness. The endurance test came on the fourth day. 10 miles of terrain, sand, slope, and mud under full gear. The kind of test that broke even the cocky ones. Coleman stood by the track, stopwatch in hand, grinning. "You washouts have 2 hours. Don't die out there." Alara adjusted her straps and said nothing. When the whistle blew, Delta Unit exploded forward, everyone desperate to prove they didn't belong in last place. The first mile was chaos, boots slipping, bodies colliding, curses thrown like grenades. But Alara moved differently. No wasted steps, no heavy breaths. Just rhythm, steady, deliberate, unbroken. By mile 6, the pack was falling apart. A recruit named Hensley tripped and stayed down, gasping. Miller, one of the quieter ones, tried to help him up, but was too spent himself. Coleman yelled from the jeep, "Leave him. You're wasting time." Alara jogged past them, her pace unchanged, but something in her expression shifted. She stopped, turned back, and hauled Hensley to his feet without a word. Together they crossed the finish line 40 minutes later. Coleman was waiting, jaw tight. "You're not here to play medic, Quinn," he snapped. "This is an endurance test, not charity work." Alara met his stare, her face unreadable. "Endurance isn't leaving people behind," she said quietly. Then she walked off before he could respond. By evening, the camp buzzed again, but not with laughter this time. In the mess hall, the air felt different. The stories spread in whispers. The MPs who'd handled her bag that morning had been reassigned to a restricted division. Someone said the armory alarm had gone off when Coleman tried to move it again. Red Seal triggered, a cook whispered to another. They had to call command to shut it down. Coleman didn't mention it, but his tone softened during roll call. He didn't take her bag anymore. Didn't make the jokes. Not that the others stopped. The recruits still watched her like she was a strange animal, something dangerous but caged. Later that night, Alara sat at the workbench in the dim light of the armory, cleaning rifles with methodical care. The others joked nearby, clumsy with fatigue. Miller, the one she'd helped on the course, hesitated, then sat across from her. He pretended to focus on his rifle, but after a minute, he spoke. "Hey," he said quietly. "That run today, you didn't have to stop for him." Alara didn't look up. He would have passed out. "Still," Miller said. "Coleman's gonna make you pay for it." She slid the rifle bolt into place, checked it, then finally met his eyes. He already did. Miller nodded slowly, then after a pause, said the thing everyone else was thinking. "Who are you?" Ilara's expression didn't change. She reached for the next rifle, her voice barely above a whisper. "No one you'd believe." The light flickered. Somewhere outside, the intercom buzzed faintly, a static pulse that cut through the silence for just a second. Miller frowned, glancing at the ceiling. But Ilara kept working, her movements calm, unbothered. By lights out, Coleman's voice echoed down the hall, barking orders for tomorrow's evaluation. No one noticed the black case had been returned to her bunk, placed neatly beside her bag. No one except Ilara, who paused for a moment, her gaze steady, before turning out the light. The morning sun cut across the training yard like a blade, throwing sharp lines of light across the concrete. The camp buzzed with tension, not the usual drill day energy, but something heavier. The visiting Navy SEALs had arrived, and their presence alone was enough to turn the air electric. Their trucks rolled through the gate in silence, engines low, their faces unreadable behind mirrored glasses. They didn't look around, didn't speak to the recruits. They didn't have to. Everyone already knew who they were. Today's exercise was supposed to be a joint simulation, the kind that determined who got to stay in the program and who would be dismissed by week's end. The recruits had been divided into mixed units, each paired with SEAL observers. Coleman strutted around the staging area, his voice booming over the intercom. "Let's make a good impression, people. Don't embarrass me in front of the real soldiers." His tone dripped with pride, though none of the SEALs looked at him long enough to care. Ilara stood off to the side, helmet tucked under her arm, eyes on the horizon. Her name had appeared on the assignment list again by mistake, or maybe by design. Either way, no one wanted her on their team. Coleman had made sure of that. He stuck her in the back of the rotation with the words, "You'll observe, nothing more. Try not to break anything." The simulation began at 0900. A full tactical scenario, hostage retrieval, mixed terrain, digital oversight from command. The system ran on an encrypted network that fed live data to every unit in the field, coordinates, obstacles, ammo counts. But 30 minutes in, the screens began to flicker. Then, all at once, they went black. Static filled every headset. Voices overlapped, distorted by interference. The SEALs tried to re-establish contact, their operators hammering keyboards in the control room. Nothing. The base commander barked orders, frustration bleeding into his tone. "We're blind. Pull them back. Reset the system before someone gets hurt." Then, through the noise, a voice cut in calm, steady female. "Team Alpha, shift bearing 245. Secondary evac point secured. Echo Squad, Titan formation. Your right flank is compromised. Ridge, your entry points exposed, reroute east, through grid 6. Extraction in 4 minutes. Copy?" Every console in the control room flickered back to life at once. The digital maps realigned. Coordinates updated. The SEAL teams moved like they'd been rehearsing this their entire lives, responding instantly to the instructions. Within minutes, the scenario that had been collapsing turned flawless. The hostages rescued, the teams regrouped, the comms stable. The entire base watched stunned. The commander leaned over his technician. "Who authorized that channel?" The tech's fingers flew across the keys. His face drained of color. "Sir, it's not one of ours." "Then where the hell is it coming from?" The technician hesitated, then turned the monitor so the commander could see. The source trace blinked in red, Maintenance Bay 3, restricted storage. "Isn't that where?" the commander began. Where Quinn's bag was impounded, the tech finished quietly. Coleman was already on the move before the words fully registered. He stormed across the compound, boots slamming against the pavement, 2 MPs trailing behind him. When he shoved open the maintenance bay door, he found Ilara standing inside, her sleeves rolled up, cleaning grease from a disassembled field generator. The bag sat on the workbench beside her untouched. "What did you do?" Coleman barked, pointing at the bag like it was a bomb. "You think this is funny? You hacking our system now?" Ilara looked up slowly, her expression unreadable. You said it was off limits. Don't get smart with me. He grabbed the bag, slamming it onto the table. You've been playing games since you got here. Who are you really? Alara's eyes moved past him, toward the door. You're about to find out. Before he could speak, the base alarms cut through the air, not in warning this time, but in recognition. A convoy of black vehicles rolled to a stop outside, their engines idling low. The door swung open again, and Commander Ridge stepped inside. Even in a room full of hardened soldiers, Ridge carried a presence that demanded silence. He scanned the scene once, the MPs, Coleman's flushed face, Alara standing motionless by the workbench. Then his eyes met hers. The shift was immediate. His shoulders straightened, his expression softened. For a moment, the years seemed to fall away from his face. He stepped forward, stopping a few feet from her. Commander Quinn, ma'am. The words landed like a thunderclap. Every movement in the room froze. Coleman blinked, mouth open, trying to process what he'd just heard. The MPs looked at each other, unsure whether to salute or stand down. Alara didn't speak. She just gave the faintest nod, acknowledgement, nothing more. Ridge turned to the others, his voice low but sharp. Who authorized the confiscation of Commander Quinn's property? Coleman stammered. Sir, I didn't know. That's the point, Ridge interrupted. He reached for the bag, handed it back to Alara, and said quietly, We've been waiting for you. She took it, slung it over her shoulder, and looked once more at Coleman. Her voice was calm, almost kind. You really should have listened. Ridge motioned to the MPs, clear the room. As Alara walked out beside him, the rest of the base watched through the open doors. No one spoke. The woman they'd mocked, ignored, and doubted just had a Navy SEAL commander salute her like she was carved from the same steel as the ocean itself. The hallway outside the maintenance bay felt unnaturally quiet. The sound of boots, heavy and deliberate, echoed down the corridor as the SEALs fell into formation around Alara. Their movements were precise, controlled, protective, not hostile. Every recruit and officer they passed stepped aside without being told, eyes darting between her and Commander Ridge like they were witnessing something they weren't supposed to see. Coleman stood near the exit, pale and sweating, his earlier swagger stripped bare. His voice cracked when he spoke. Ma'am, Commander, I didn't know. He stopped himself, words tripping over one another. It was procedure. I didn't. Alara didn't even slow her stride. She adjusted the strap on her canvas bag and said quietly, You wanted to see what was in the bag. You just did. She didn't look back, didn't need to. The words hung behind her like a shadow, and Coleman's expression broke into something that wasn't quite guilt and wasn't quite fear, something deeper, the weight of realizing how small he'd been in a room much bigger than he'd understood. Outside, the sun was blinding. The SEAL transport trucks idled at the curb, black paint gleaming under the light. Ridge walked beside her, the difference between their steps subtle but clear, his stride measured to match hers, a gesture of quiet respect. The wind caught the edges of his uniform jacket as he glanced sideways. We thought you'd left the program, he said. His voice wasn't questioning, it was personal, almost soft. I did, Alara replied. She tightened her grip on the bag. But someone needed to remind them what leadership looks like. Ridge's mouth curved, not quite a smile. You always did pick your own missions. They reached the vehicle, and Ridge opened the door for her, a small motion that spoke volumes to those watching from the steps. The recruits who had laughed, the officers who had doubted her, they stood frozen now, realization slowly sinking into their bones. The woman they dismissed as an outsider was walking away with the kind of authority no rank could fake. As the engine roared to life, dust swirled across the pavement. Through the rear window, the base seemed to shrink, the watchtower, the training yard, the barracks lined in their rigid order. Then, for a brief moment, every monitor across the compound flickered. Lines of code streamed, replaced by a single phrase in bold red text. Operation Spectre, active. The room operators in the command center stared at their screens, confused. Is that live? One of them whispered. Another shook his head slowly. That program was decommissioned 5 years ago. No one dared to shut it off. Back in the yard, The wind carried the last of the engine noise into silence. The recruits were dismissed, but no one moved. Miller lingered, his rifle still slung across his shoulder. Something pulled him toward the barracks, the corner bunk where Alara had slept quietly, alone. Her locker was unlocked. Inside, everything was gone except a single folded sheet of paper resting on the metal shelf. He hesitated before picking it up. The handwriting was clean, deliberate. Respect isn't given. It's tested ****. He read it twice, his throat tightening. Around him, the others filtered in, one by one, drawn by the same need to see for themselves. The air felt heavier somehow, as if her absence had left a weight that no one knew how to carry. Tara, who'd mocked her the loudest, stood at the doorway, her hands clenched. She looked smaller now, her voice barely above a whisper. Was she really a commander? Miller didn't answer. He just folded the note carefully and slipped it into his pocket. "Does it matter?" he said. "She led better than any of us." Outside, a low rumble faded into the horizon. Somewhere out there, a convoy of black vehicles was heading toward the coast, where classified operations never made the news. Inside one of them sat Alara Quinn, her eyes fixed on the water ahead, the light of the ocean flashing against her reflection. Ridge sat in the passenger seat, silent, respectful. He finally spoke without looking at her. "You think they'll understand what you were trying to teach them?" Alara leaned back, her gaze steady on the waves. "Eventually," she said. "The good ones always do." As the convoy disappeared down the road, the base gates closed behind them with a hollow clang. In the distance, the monitors inside the command center went black again, one by one, until the only thing left was the reflection of startled faces staring back at themselves. The legend of Commander Alara Quinn wasn't written in medals or mission reports. It lived instead in the silence that followed her departure, the silence that made men like Coleman rethink the meaning of command, and recruits like Miller understand what strength really looked like. Somewhere beyond the coastline, where the water met the sky, Operation Spectre had just begun again. And this time, she wasn't coming back to be seen.